Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the joint dinner with the Montgomery County Planning Board and Historic Preservation Commission. I'm Artie Harris, Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board, and I'm so delighted to have this meeting. The last time the boards got together was in November of 2023. Our goal is to have a meeting every year, and we're going to make sure that continues to happen because it's so important to get together to learn about each other and to discuss what each other have been doing, and so that is so important. So I'm just going to turn it over to the chair of the planning board for the historic preservation, Jeffrey Haynes, but I wanted to at least say welcome. We had a chance before the public meeting to break bread together and have dinner, and that's also so important to get together. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Jeffrey Haynes.
Thank you, Artie, and I second your comments. I'm glad that we are able to get together and in an open forum and discuss various events. And so we find this a very useful relationship-building exercise and hope everybody enjoys the evening. As everybody may have heard, I'm Jeffrey Haynes, Chairman of the HBC, and I think we'll go around the table and have everybody introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. Whoa, sorry. Wow. Hello. Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Thank you, Chair Harris, for hosting the HPC and the staff here this evening. My name is Rebecca Ballo, and I'm the chief for the newly formed Historic Preservation Division, formerly the Historic Preservation Section in the Planning Department.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Bond. I'm a commissioner on the HPC. I've been a commissioner since October, so I'm relatively new, but so far, so good.
Hi, I'm Brian Crane. I'm archaeologist for the Historic Preservation Division.
Hi, James Hedrick, Commissioner for the Montgomery County Planning Board, and I hate to leave good company, but my niece was born this morning, and I have been told I need to let my wife go see her niece and her sister in the hospital. So apologies for heading off, but thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it, and I hope catch up with you all soon. Thank you.
Dan Bruckert, Historic Preservation staff.
Good evening, Alana Branda, Chief of Staff for the Planning Board.
Good evening, John Labers, Historic Preservation staff.
Serena Bollinger, Historic Preservation Master Plan.
Robert Cronenberg, one of two deputy directors here in the Planning Department.
Karen Burdett, HPC Commissioner.
Good evening. My name is Sandra Prather. I am an HPC Commissioner.
Good evening. I'm Mark Dominiani. I'm a commissioner as well since 2023.
Good evening. Zara Nasser. I'm also a commissioner with HPC.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. I'm Sean Bartley, the Montgomery County Planning Board Commission.
Good evening. I'm Devin Martha, Historic Preservation staff.
Jonathan Kaplan, Historic Preservation Commissioner since, I think, late 25.
Hey everyone. Oh, I'm sorry, I did the same thing. Good evening, I'm Josh Linden, Commissioner on the Planning Board.
Good evening, Michael Galway, Vice Chair of the HPC.
Jason, do you want to say hello?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Jason Sartori. Sorry, you can hear in my voice why I'm not there present with you. I'm still recovering from being sick, but I appreciate the opportunity to be able to tune in because I think this is such a great thing for the two boards, the commission and the board, to get together. If I didn't say, I'm Jason Sartori. I'm the planning director for Montgomery County.
Thanks, Jason. It's good to see you. So, okay, so we have our agenda in front of us. We have kind of a PowerPoint presentation where I'm going to be swapping off with Jeff, but don't think of this as a super, structured, like stiff evening where we have to wait till the end of the PowerPoint to make any comments or ask any questions or anything like that. That's not what this is at all. What we have on our agenda tonight, after the introduction, I'm going to go through really quickly kind of the different roles, like the different hats that all of us wear here at the table. Talk a little bit about some of the racial equity and social justice items that the Historic Preservation Division and the HPC and the Planning Board have been working on together this past year, even though you guys may not have realized you're working on it together. I'm here to remind you of that. A little bit of a discussion of our FY27 budget requests for the HP division, and hoping to get some, feedback and discussion about how the commissioners and the planning board can work together. It's always a tough budget year for us in Montgomery County, but talk about ways, to work together to promote the work in the division. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff for some successful examples of adaptive reuse of historic buildings here in the county. And then we're going to talk about joint outreach efforts, some really fun events that our program has done in the past, and we'd love to hear ideas from all of you about ways that you would like to collaborate together to create new events for us moving forward. Okay, so introduction of board members, check. Roles and responsibilities. Here we go. I promise this is the slide that has the most text and is the most dry stuff you're going to hear all evening. But as a reminder, so what is the HPC? The HPC is a quasi-judicial commission that is empowered by the laws of Montgomery County to approve historic area work permits, and they have other roles and duties as described in Chapter 24A of the County Code. All of the HPC members here tonight are appointed by recommendation of the county executive with confirmation by the county council. The HPC also recommends historic site and district designations with HP master plan amendments and locational atlas determinations to the planning board. So the planning board, you guys don't see the hops, but that's the bread and butter of what we do. We are all here, twice a month in this room approving out hops the same way you guys are, running your planning board meetings on Thursday, but you see the designations that come forward to the planning board. The HPC also makes recommendations on tax credit applications to the Department of Finance. The HPC reviews about 130 tax credit applications every single year, and in a given year, it can vary from $4 to $6 million in tax credits that the HPC is recommending be approved out. The HPC is also advised by the Office of the County Attorney. So this is, again, a reminder that they're a little different since they operate through the county executive's office and staff, that you guys have the commission attorneys, Matt Mills and Emily Vias. The HPC is advised by Walter Wilson in the county attorney's office. So then for the HPC members, what is the Montgomery County Planning Board's responsibilities vis-a-vis historic preservation? So the planning board uses the same criteria that the HPC does from Chapter 24A to make recommendations on historic site and district designations. The planning board makes recommendations to the county executive and council on historic preservation easements. That is kind of a small part of our program, but an important one as well. The planning board makes budget recommendations for the Historic Preservation Office as part of the larger planning department budget, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The planning board also helps to set budget and work program priorities for MNC PPC owned and designated historic properties. So a number of our park properties that are designated as historic sites, the planning board is responsible for, helping to approve out their budgets and their work programs that activate these sites that are designated. The planning board adds sites to the burial sites inventory on a yearly basis every May. Brian Crane, our archaeologist, brings those through to the planning board. And then also the planning board has the authority to add or remove sites from the locational atlas and index of historic sites. We've had a couple of those cases come through this past year. And then our office, the Historic Preservation Division. So we staff the HPC and we staff the planning board. We are all of your staff. The Historic Preservation Division, we are also recognized as the certified local government for Montgomery County. So that's a particular section of federal law the National Historic Preservation Act that deals with something called Section 106 review. So our office is the certified local government, so something like the Beltway project, our office commented on and participated in that project in coordination with the rest of the planning department, but actually separately from our other colleagues or from the planning board, who also participated in that undertaking, that project. We apply for grant funding for special projects. I apply for grants from the feds and the states to fund some of the work that we do. We apply for grant funding in partnership with other preservation partners. For example, this May for Preservation Month, our office is participating with Preservation Maryland and 3 other Maryland counties on preservation trades workshops. We got a grant from the state to do a cemetery restoration workshop at the Jerusalem Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Norbeck, and you'll be hearing more about that. So I'm always trying to see like what funds are out there to promote historic preservation in the county. Our staff also participate in mandatory county executive training for the boards, commissions, and committees. We also appear as witnesses for the Department of Permitting Services and DHCA in court cases that involve historically designated properties. So we are regularly in district court if there are violations against property owners that have historic buildings, either if they've done unpermitted work or they've done work that didn't comply with their permits. And in any given year, we have about 20 to 30 cases actively moving through the court system. Our staff work with the Office of the County Attorney and the MNC PPC attorneys as appropriate, and we also administer historic preservation easements on behalf of Montgomery County government. So separate again from the commission, sometimes Montgomery County, through the county executive's office, they also hold preservation easements, and our staff manage those. Because unlike transportation or environmental planners or some of the other disciplines, there are no other historians that work for the county executive. It's just us. We're everywhere. So we do that for them too. Any questions about any of that? Nope, okay. So I wanted to talk really briefly about racial equity and social justice. Racial equity and social justice is one of the pillars of the planning department's recently adopted general plan, Thrive Montgomery 2050. So the last time that we did this joint dinner, we talked about racial equity initiatives that were already underway in the Historic Preservation Division. So I just wanted to go over some highlights for the year. So this was a great one, the ribbon cutting and reopening for the Scotland AME Zion Church in Potomac. And Artie was there with me, and that was a really wonderful, wonderful day. And Jason was there as well. I might have like cried a little bit, or maybe a lot at some points, because it was just wonderful. So this is a designated historic site in Potomac that our office was working really closely with the church since 2019 when they had catastrophic flooding and had to close the building. So I worked with the church to add the building to the Montgomery Heritage Area, which is our state designated heritage area, to allow them to qualify for hundreds of thousands of dollars in emergency grants. I worked with them to successfully apply. We ended up getting $290,000 in preservation grants across 3 grant application. I worked to manage those grants on behalf of the church with Glenstone as our partner during the construction phase, during the rehabilitation phase. And I was on these internal working groups for permitting. And this past spring, they had the ribbon cutting. I have never been in a room with more like dignitaries from Montgomery County than at that event. And it was wonderful. So the church is now back in their space. If folks ever want to go on a Sunday, Reverend Huggins would love to see any of you there. She will call you out specifically. She always recognizes new faces and makes sure to embrace old friends too as they come. So that was a really wonderful, wonderful project. Another project that was just recently completed where the commission, the HPC and the planning board recommended the designation of Timberlawn as a historic site. This was Serena's project. Timberlawn was the birthplace of Special Olympics. And particularly want to call out Serena for her really excellent work and engagement with that property owner and our communications team. There were a number of videos and other media that were created around this designation that I hope everybody's had a chance to check it out. If not, it's on our website, and that was just fantastic. And as Serena had pointed out, is this the only site in the country? As far as we know, it's the only site in. Oh, can you turn on the mic and say, sorry.
As far as we know, it's the only site that has been designated specifically for its association with people with intellectual disabilities and intellectual disability history.
Mm-hmm. So that was just, icing on the cake for this really wonderful project. Yes. Another one that is going through as part of the Clarksburg sector plan amendment that is at committee hearings with the council right now is the designation of the Clarksburg Heights Historic District and the Community of Faith United Methodist Church. So these are Community of Faith United Methodist Church and cemetery, because the designation includes the cemetery in the back, and there's a picture on the bottom. So this recognizes the historic African-American community of Rocky Hill, just south of the Clarksburg Historic District in the town. And we have a picture of the church and the cemetery on the left, and then on the right, one of the representative pictures of one of the houses. They're in this very small subdivision, Clarksburg Heights. I think is it John, is it 6? Yeah, it's just 6 houses. And the Wims family and others who lived in that community who were very, very active in the school system and in the Montgomery County community in the mid part of the century. So thank you to the planning board for unanimously voting that forward when that came to you guys. And we're looking forward to having the council approve it out as well. Then we come to the Rosebud House Master Plan Historic Site designation. This was Serena's project. Oh, and I should say the Clarksburg ones, I'm sorry, that was John's. That was John's project. And this was Serena's, the Rosebud House, working with Ms. Romaine Rose, the owner of the property. It is going to the county council for public hearings the public hearings at the end of February, committee hearings in March. And this house is significant for the history, for the African-American history of Sandy Spring. There are no other resources in Sandy Spring that are designated, that are associated with this part of the African-American community. And this is another one like Timberlawn where the owner came forward to request the designation. Okay, so the fun parts, well, it's not over, but we're going to pause the most fun part with the pictures, and we're going to talk about the budget for next year. So as part of our FY27 budget and the Historic Preservation Division, we have some ongoing recurring items and then some requested items. So what I'll do is I'll just read through these and then I don't know, maybe turn it over to Artie or other members or Jeff and other folks if you want to talk about, what's the best way to advocate for these items. So our recurring items in master planning. So there are already 5 to 6 area master plans. So these are geographic area plans that the county council has already approved as part of the planning department's work program. And historic preservation are staffed to those. We are leading a locational atlas phase 1 amendment. We are leading a Carderock Springs Historic District amendment. This is a request that came forward from the community of Carderock Springs to be considered as a local historic district. So we're in the initial planning phases of that now. John is the project manager for that. And then other projects we have going forward, we are going to be installing 3 new Untold Stories historic markers in May, hopefully for Preservation Month, fingers crossed. If not, those will get installed in June. Serena, do you mind saying, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Do you mind saying really quickly what those 3 markers are that we have planned?
Sure. So one will be actually for the Scotland AME Zion Church. And so they'll be receiving a marker, and then Hefner Park and Community Center in Tacoma Park. And that is a collaboration with the city of Tacoma. And then the Edward U. Taylor School in Boyd's.
Thank you. And then we have our mapping segregation project, phase 2, still on the work program, though that is currently unfunded. The way we finished phase 1 is that we had funds for 2-term contract employees, and we currently don't have that funding. So it's on the work program, but it's not something that we've been able to advance. Our requested items as part of the budget, we are requesting adding to the work program a burial sites master plan amendment. This would be a countywide master plan amendment. Brian was just presenting at the planning board today on the context survey that we've done to support that countywide amendment for burial sites. We're not requesting any additional funds as part of that, meaning that it'll be done just internally with staff resources that we already have. We are also requesting a locational atlas update, also with no additional funds. Staffing. We are requesting a cultural resources planner 1 to work on master planning initiatives. And I'll stop there. You know, I hadn't planned, and again, Artie, I don't want to put you on the spot with it at all, but you know, I hadn't planned to give like background about the budget, but maybe for the commissioners, like to understand, like how many rounds of a budget hearing does it have to go through? It like, what does the planning board do to get our budget kind of ready to go for council?
Yes, so we just, and Jason, you can also chime in after. So big picture, we have already submitted a budget to the county executive, and that was based on the departments prepare budgets and they bring them to the board for approval. So it's not a one-time deal. We had a working session or 2 going through each department's needs, like the planning department, the parks department, and the planning department would have subset of all the things they want to do. And then we would, knowing the board, we knew that this would be a tough budget year. So we know all these things that the planning parks want to do are important, and we would love to fund them all, but because we knew it was a tough year, we asked the planning department, which Rebecca's under, to scale it back a little bit and prioritize, because they started with 10 positions, and then more than, but 10, and then we asked them to scale it back, and to scale it back to 5+1, sort of, which the historic cultural resources planner is in that 5+1. So how do we, and then so we submitted that budget to the county executive, and is it early March? Is it, as I understand?
March 13th.
Mid-March.
Yeah, March, the county executive will come back saying, we want you to, it's been the history, they come back and say, we want you to cut X amount out of your budget. They don't necessarily tell you where to cut, but they say cut. And then we have to go back to the county executive saying, these are our non-recommended reductions to get to your cut. And then we go and we go to the council members and explain why it is very hard to meet that county exec's budget. If we had to cut, you know, it's very hard to do our work if we had to cut that much, and we advocate with them to on our behalf to add some back. But by that time, everyone has, they have the whole pie of budget, and so whatever they give us back, they take from someone else in the whole piece. So it's a back and forth, but we have several rounds we talk to each council member, and then we go to the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee and advocate, and we have rounds back and forth with them, and then they take our budget to the full council. So big picture, that's what it is, but they don't specifically say we're taking, of this, what we're taking out, the county exec, it's for historic preservation. They don't say what, they just say, they cut the budget and they say, you work it out. And so that's why it's very tough. But what's important to me, and I'll have Jason talk through it a little bit, based on what you talked about, Rebecca, your budget consists of work for MNC, PPC, HPC, the counties, so maybe there's, I don't know, it's a way that we can advocate a little bit better because it's not just MNC, PPC. And so I wonder if we can also do that. And the other piece is that a way to show the importance, we advocate really hard for the work we do, work Rebecca does, the work all the departments do, but it's also good to get the community to advocate to the council members, right? And so one is the work we could, with Rebecca's help and others, just advocate to the community. This is so important, and a lot of them now, the untold markers, you've done such a great job at that. It's important around racial justice and social equity. I mean, and all the big piece it's really important. That's a really big deal. So if we can advocate to the community members, especially the ones that would resonate with me, that would also help them to advocate to the council. But we do a great job in advocating for ourselves, and because we know the work that historic preservation does it so much. So I'll leave it at that, but I think advocacy, getting like, instead of only us advocating for ourselves, if we can get others to advocate on behalf, that's always very helpful. And also my piece, maybe the piece that if pushing that historic preservation budget is more than just what you do for MNC PPC. So Jason, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I would just add that so the budget process, Chair Harris mentioned that we'll find out on March 13th what the county executive's recommended budget is. It'll be approved in May by the council, and then it'll take effect on July 1. And then we essentially start the process for FY28 in July. So it is a year-long process for us. And one of the things I can tell you that in the planning department generally, we are understaffed. We are about 14% lower in staffing than we were in 2009. And we see this, and we can feel it in every corner of the department, but it is especially evident in our HP work. The amount of work that the team does that Rebecca was highlighting earlier, it's insane. It is a ton of work, and there's a lot of expectations there. That just in the amount of hops that have to be processed, and then in all of the master planning efforts, and so we think it's really critical for us to be able to get this a new position. I think the opportunity that we had by creating HP as its own division elevates HP within the department and within the context of the county. And so hopefully we'll be able to position ourselves a little bit better to be able to advocate for the staffing we need for this team. But I would say, as Chair Harris mentioned, we got it narrowed down to 6 positions. We think we need a lot more. So our overall request has 6. One of them is this Cultural Resources Planner 1. Just earlier this week, we met with the Office of Management and Budget, and they asked us to identify, of those 6 positions, which are critical and which are, additional. We think they're all necessary, but we identified 3 that were critical, one of them being this Cultural Resources Planner 1. And so we're going to keep, kind of beating the drum on this. And we do know that it is going to be a tough year. We may not get the funding for this, but we also know that no one ever comes out and actually does advocate. There are public tests, there's public hearings. No one comes out and cheers on and comes out and just, testifies on the planning department budget. It's not a big thing that people get excited about, but any opportunity that we can get from partners, especially for this particular case, if the HPC were so inclined to submit a letter to the council to even testify, submit a letter from Chair Haynes in support of this request, that would definitely help and go a long way, so that it's not just us advocating for what we think is an important position.
And I don't know if any of the board members have any thoughts, but that's if we come up with some other things, we will let you know, but you're advocating, the commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, advocating, getting others that you know to advocate would be so great for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Artie, Jason, or Robert, we don't have, do we have public hearing dates yet for the budget this spring, or do you know when testimony needs to be submitted or scheduled?
I don't think so.
Lana?
I don't believe they've put the dates out yet, but it's usually the first week in April. So I would estimate that week of April 6th that they will be. There's usually at least 2 in the daytime and 2 in the evening. They do fill up, so I would recommend if you do want to testify in person, or they do have, usually they have at least one virtual opportunity that you, as soon as the signups go up. And they generally start advertising and doing signups pretty much right after the executive's budget comes out. So right around March 13th, or I think that Monday, I guess, is the 16th following that, the council will probably start putting those dates out pretty quickly then. And when, as Chair Harris said, we will have our time before the PHP, the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. We will not get that date until much closer. So it could be as early as that week after April 6th, or it could be, the first week in May. And then the budget goes to the full council for final recommendations and reconciliation. So there is those opportunities, the public hearings that first week in April, and then conversations throughout until the council usually approves the budget the Thursday before Memorial Day weekend. So I believe, if my calendar in my head is correct, that's right around the 22nd of May.
Thank you. Are there any other recommendations, from members of the planning board or Alana too, about, are there opportunities for commissioners to talk to the county executive or to talk to council members individually about the budget? Is that something that is done?
We do.
We clearly do, and I think pitched this at some point to the HPC maybe a couple months ago, but I think it's always a good thing for you to go to the council members and just individually tell them. And I mean, we have the bullets here that you can use for talking points to say, here's the work that they do, and the need is pretty. They're asking for one position, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're looking at it from the totality of the budget, every little thing counts. But I think talking to the county executive, his staff, and the council members is definitely not, it's appropriate, it's okay, because everyone is advocating for their budget and for different positions and work program items, and I think it's even more appropriate to advocate for the staff and for the work that they do.
Thank you.
And I would say advocate that's in writing, that's in person, however you would like to do it, even phone calls, so.
Awesome, thank you. Has anybody here, as part of the commission or any other boards or commissions, had experience, advocating with the county executive or the council members? Sandra, would you mind talking about that a little bit, what that was for and just how your experience with that?
Yes, this is Commissioner Prather, and over the last 3 years, at least once a month, I advocate for the community of Prathertown in unique ways and the residents who are well-lived. So my advocacy approaches have been in person. I had 2 exchanges this week with council members for aging in place. I've also written letters. I remember testifying to the planning board January 9th, I believe it was, in Germantown regarding M83. So again, my experience has been both in writing, in person, and also going to some of the meetings. I also teach my mentees who are new young professionals how to go to meetings, how to be well prepared, what to read in advance, how to form their questions, how to follow up. So I have young professionals that I mentor year-round, and they are actively engaged in watching policies, watching for meetings. We were at a meeting on Monday or Tuesday regarding housing, attainment, and policies and priorities. So again, in short, there are like 5 ways that we consistently and intentionally advocate in writing, in person, join the planning sessions, email. Sometimes they do reach out through Instagram and post important or complimentary pieces. And one last thing is we invite council members to our events or our meetings. And they also conduct a Civic 101 session so that all people in the community can be well educated and share their voice and share their experiences. And it's very inclusive and unifying.
That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. I know one thing that we've tried to do with the Untold Stories marker program is to achieve some kind of geographic diversity with the markers as well as the stories that we're trying to tell. So this year we're trying to get in the ground the Scotland marker that is in one council member's district in Potomac. We're trying to get the Tacoma Park one, the Hefner Park marker installed, and then also the marker for the Edward U. Taylor School up in Boyd's, which is District 6. It's Marilyn Balcom's district up in Boyd's. And the last round of markers that we installed, we had a ribbon cutting ceremony and had a lot of great press, and for the installation down here at Wheaton Veterans Plaza, and Councilmember Natalie Fanny Gonzalez was invited to that, and she spoke and I think had a really wonderful time at that event, and Chair Harris and the rest of the planning board members were there, and Karen Burdett, Karen, were you chair at? No, I was vice chair. Vice chair at the time, and came out. Karen, what were some of your impressions of how that went?
Well, that was just a wonderful experience to see everybody who turned out for the marker, and it was for the Elsie and Romeo Horad House, which is just a remarkable, a site, and that all the people who came at least had a understanding of how important the Horads were in the African American community in the 40s and 50s, and how important it is, even though the house itself architecturally may not be, spectacular, but it is such an important site for Montgomery County in that era, and Down County in particular. So it was just really nice to see all the people who came out and all the young people who came out, which was also heartwarming to see young people interested in the site and in historic preservation.
Thank you for that. Jason and Chair Harris said something interesting too, to think about maybe for the commissioners, if you'd like help from the staff, preparing briefing materials and talking about a lot of what the office does and what the HPC encourages. The markers are our own placemaking initiative. The planning department now has its own design and placemaking division, like there's a historic preservation division, but historic preservation does its own placemaking, just with these markers and with other programs that we do for the whole, county and not just for MNC-PPC.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the budget, lobbying? No? Okay. Great. So now we're going to move into a part of the program talking about adaptive reuse as economic development. Economic development is also one of the pillars of Thrive, and I'm going to turn this over to my chair, Jeff Haynes, and I'll do the slides.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. As Rebecca mentioned, we're going to look at 3+1 projects in Montgomery County that are local to everyone here. The first is the Bethesda Community Store, and a little bit of background on that. It's one of the oldest surviving commercial structures in Bethesda. It served over 90 years as a neighborhood general store and community gathering place before it closed in 2016. While the current building dates back to 1924, a general store operated on the site as early as 1890 and served passengers of the Tenleytown-Rockville streetcar line. It was also known early on as Morgan's Store or Wilson's Store, so it goes back quite a ways. In 1924, the current single-room front gable frame structure was built by John Moyer. It features a prominent front porch and a gable roof that later displayed the distinctive three-sided Coca-Cola sign that we probably all have driven by 100 times. In 1986, the HPC designated the site as a landmark, protecting it from demolition or significant alteration during Bethesda's rapid suburban growth. In its later years, it transitioned from a grocery store to a popular deli known for its barbecue, breakfast sandwiches, and lifestyle items like lobster roll. Got to be diversify that menu.
Did you have the lobster rolls
I can't say that I did.
No?
I didn't have the pleasure, but I'm sure we could find some neighbors that could testify to that. Unfortunately, in 2016, the owner at the time, Arnie Feynman, closed the store in May of 2026 due to drop in business. But fortunately, I believe it was Sandy Spring Builders purchased the property with the goal of restoring the structure. And as the photographs show, the structure was in dire condition. The HBC members had the opportunity to walk through with the structural engineer to observe this structure, and there was significant deterioration, insect deterioration, joists that were bearing on the ground that were rotting away. So we are fortunate that Sandy Spring Builders took personal ownership of the building as Bethesda residents. They took it on. In 2024, the HPC approved a HOP application for the restoration and addition of the Bethesda Community Store. And as we can see today, the addition and the center lower photo showing the original structure to the left, the addition to the right with a transition space in between that separates the old from the new. And so now we have I don't think there's a new tenant yet, but.
Not yet, they're working on it.
Not yet, they're working on it. But this, while a small project, shows how it can significantly add to the neighborhood. The neighborhood is identified by this building. It serves not only local residents, but the surrounding suburban hospital, NIH. And what you probably can't see is there is space where they have tables. You can sit outside, et cetera, and bring your family there for hopefully some ice cream or a nice breakfast or coffee in the future. So our next project takes us to Tacoma Park. This is the Tacoma Park Bank Building, located at 6950 Carroll Avenue, which is a prominent corner in the historic Tacoma Park District. It was built in 1927 and is one of the most recognizable early 20th century commercial structures in Tacoma Park, and served as a major bank branch until it was vacated in 2019. It's a three-story masonry structure designed in the classic Beaux-Arts architectural style, and because of its location, makes it a long-standing anchor of the Carroll Avenue streetscape. I don't know how long it was vacant for. Do you have any idea?
Dan? 3.
3 years?
3 years.
Yeah, correct, 3 years.
About 3 years, okay. Unfortunately, in 2023, the building was purchased by Sangfroid Distillery. It's a Hyattsville-based craft distillery who is looking to branch out, and they've purchased the building. In 2022, the HPC held 2 preliminary consultations and approved a HOP in May of 2023 to convert the former bank into a distillery and cocktail bar, which hopefully will ensure that the building remains active for a long time and contribute to the commercial revitalization of Tacoma Park. Here we can see some renderings. On the left side, there is an addition that was approved that will house equipment. We made, I believe it's a handicap access door on the lower left of the building, which were some of the changes that were approved to the exterior of the building. The right rendering shows the potential for the interior build-out of the distillery with seating and a bar, and should be a good time. Look forward to that being completed. But again, it's another, what we feel is a project that has huge community impact, bringing new life to an old building, providing traffic to the downtown Tacoma Park area, and it preserves a historic structure while giving it a modern, community-friendly purpose. And I think that's really part of the goals of adaptive reuse.
So Jeff, I want to say that's in my community. I go by there a couple times, 3 times a week. My wife walking through the community, or walking to the metro station. We can't wait for the building, not necessarily the distillery part, but wait for meaning that wait for it to open. We've been walking by, when is it going to open? But it looks like they're getting close. I peep in the window every time, So, yep, it was the old Bank of America building when I came to Tacoma Park about 25 years ago. So, yep, sure to bring a lot of life to the community. It'll revitalize that little corner there. So, yep, it's a wonderful, wonderful example of a historic renovation, yeah.
Great, thank you.
So before we move on, there are 2 things that I want to mention. One is I did talk to the owner a couple of weeks ago, and he said the interior work is virtually done. They're just waiting on the construction of the addition. So that's sort of what the holdup is. But also, they came to the HPC as contract purchasers. So they came as to basically see if it was feasible to purchase the building and carry out their vision. And the HPC was able to provide them feedback on the record here and tell them that, yes, we're really supportive of the project. You've got some work to do on revisions, but come back and it's led to several years of work on the applicant's part, but we're almost at the finish line.
Thank you, Dan. Any other comments? No? Okay. The third project is the Warner Mansion. Sits right in the middle of Warner Circle in the heart of Kensington. It's a 4.5-acre elevated historic site. At the center, of course, is the Warner Mansion, which is a Queen Anne-styled home built in 1892. It was the home of Brainerd Warner, who was a prominent Washington, D.C. real estate developer known for major projects in the capital area. Mr. Warner purchased and subdivided much of what is now Kensington. He envisioned a garden suburb with curving streets, generous lots, and plenty of green space, intentionally contrasting to DC's rigid street grid. The mansion is a classic, as I mentioned before, Queen Anne style, featuring a massive wraparound porch, asymmetrical facade, bays and turrets projecting into the surrounding landscape. In 1914, a carriage house was added behind the mansion, which you can see in the photographs. In 2005, the Montgomery County Parks purchased the property, restored its exterior to its original appearance. The property had been vacated vacant since 2006. Finally, the Warner Circle Mansion Condominiums LLC purchased the property, submitted comprehensive plans for rehabilitation of the historic mansion and with the carriage house and an addition to the HPC in March of 2023. The HPC approved the HOP in June of 24, and the project will create 16 market rate housing units while restoring this historic structure. And there we can see the lower drawing of the proposed addition, which is at the lower left, which will house apartment units. We see some work at the foundation level in the upper left and some interior work ongoing on the upper right. I don't know if we have any more recent projects, but this would be a fun project to get a tour. If we could arrange that, a hard hat tour, maybe we can get the contractor and the architect to walk us through and talk to us about the project and how it's going and what obstacles.
Definitely. There is nothing that Carl loves more than giving a hard hat tour.
We should, yeah, let's make that happen, because I think that would be very interesting for all and appreciated by the developer.
Can I ask a quick question on this? I actually,
Over there.
I wasn't aware of this. This is a really cool project to see, and I'm just wondering if the units are for rent, or is it condominium style for sale?
It's a condominium. There are a few units left. Some have, I mean, they've been on the market and several have already sold.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so did you and I, and Jason, were you on this too?
We did a tour with Karen and with Jason last spring.
Yeah, and so, yeah, some parkland, but I guess they carve out where the building and the garages and the parks will still have ownership of land outside of it, I believe. But the building itself will be then, is either is deeded or will be deeded to the owner, the master owner, and then they've carved out the condos and it's be a beautiful, I didn't even know it existed until, it's a beautiful piece of property and it's a beautiful building, yeah.
Is it the property that's right next to the Noyes Children Library? Right across the street?
Correct, yeah.
Gotcha, yeah. Yeah, it's a wonderful location. It's very close to the center of Kensington, obviously, and yeah, it'll be incredible to see what it's like when it's finished.
When, this is Commissioner Burdett, and when we took the tour, I guess that was, when was that?
I think it was last summer.
Last summer, late, yeah. Some of the owners or future owners were there. They'd already contracted, and they were, and you can see from the largest picture, it was stud framing, that's it, no drywall or anything. And they would find where their unit is, and then they were sitting there talking about, well, I'm going to put the bed here and put the chair. They already had the vision of what their unit will look like, and they could see it in this rough space. And it was just the joy of their future home ownership that we were watching, and that was very, it was very rewarding to see that.
Thank you, Karen.
It's been a wonderful project. It's taken 20 years to come to fruition, but it's almost there. So we will definitely reach out to the developer and ask for another tour when the weather clears up a little bit for folks that are interested.
Perfect. Very good. The last project we're going to look at is this, I call it the one that got away. Is 900 Spring Street, which was the former National Sand and Gravel Association headquarters. It was built in 1964, significant for its modern brutalist architecture. There was the work of John Sullivan, who was the architect, but also John Early, an artisan of precast concrete. Mr. Early's work can be seen on Colesville Road and the Polychrome Homes, right from the street, which is also, I believe, a National Historic Landmark, if I'm correct. So in September of 2019, there was an application putting the property on the locational atlas. The application was not approved. The building was demolished by the owner in anticipation of development, but it never happened, and unfortunately, we're left with an empty lot. And we bring this up because a loss of the potential for that building and the site. And I want to talk about another Silver Spring project just a few blocks away, where the Silver Diner is going to be part of a mixed-use development project and become really a cornerstone of the project as an example of how older buildings can mix with new development and be successful. That Silver Diner mixed-use project has come before the commission a few times in the preliminary review process, and for the most part has received positive feedback. And so that's going to happen. And this is one where the quality of the architecture, the history behind it, we feel could have, and itself a little gem of a building, was lost, that the opportunity was lost, and therefore it erodes the character of the neighborhood when we lose these kinds of gems. And Silver Spring has lost a lot of little gems over the years, but this one kind of hurt because it had potential given the adjacent lot that was part of the overall lot. And hopefully, as we go forward, and I know it's always a juggling act of viability, finances, et cetera, but we need to advocate for saving these kinds of buildings when, especially one of this significance in character and history, and the architects and artisans involved to create it is really an outstanding piece that once they're gone, they're gone. So any comments, any thoughts about adaptive reuse and on any of the projects?
I enjoyed your presentation, and when that slide came up, I had a gut reaction. I was like, that place is gone, and I should have waited until you got to that part. But yeah, I really like the adaptive reuse for commercial purposes. I think history's worth preserving. My only question is, how can you get out in front of something like this and similarly Tasty Diner or the Weller dry cleaners, which are iconic parts of the community and that could be repurposed and maintain their look, character, and style for the neighborhood?
Well, that certainly is the challenge. I think it's working with the developers, providing them examples, successful examples of adaptive reuse. It's easy, and if I put myself in the developer's shoes, I get that they're in business to make a profit, and it's much easier to demolish a building and start with a clean slate. That's a fact. But it's really showing them that, look, this is an asset that can help sell your project. Here are examples of successful adaptive reuse. And while, yeah, it may take longer to recover the money over the long haul, but I think hopefully you have a developer like the Warner Mansion who takes on these kinds of projects out of pure interest. And yeah, maybe he's not going to make as much money had we cleared the site and maxed out the site with housing, sure. But what would have Kensington lost had that been allowed? So buildings create the neighborhoods that we enjoy, make them distinctive, and so trying to convey that to developers, that it's in their interest to work with the building and try to make it work.
I'd like to point out that with Tasty Diner, that building was designated. So the developer had to deal with it. And they understood that going in when they bought the property. They understood it. And they worked with us. And sometimes they got frustrated with us because we kept pushing back. But the project now is better than when they brought it to us, and the building is still there. Now, Weller's Dry Cleaners is still standing, but unfortunately, it was painted. Well, first off, its iconic sign was permanently changed, and the original Weller's panels were trashed. But the building was also painted, and most of that can be removed, and it could be restored if the current owner or a future owner chose to kind of restore it back to what it looked like. It would be restorable, and it is still standing. Now, the 900 Spring Street was unfortunate because you can just look at it, and if you were ever in the interior or saw photographs, it could have been adapted to so many uses, commercial uses or schools or clubs or community, spaces, so many opportunities. And the developer at the time promised high-rise senior affordable housing. And so that's the way, the planning board went at that moment. And the building was torn down, and it's for sale. The lot is for sale. That developer never carried through with the promise they made. And now whoever buys that property may not also never, build what was promised. So it's always, take a promise with a grain of salt if there isn't actually a signature somewhere in a document that they will do what they're promising to do, because they can back out.
It's always tough. It's, these trade-offs. The diner there, I just feel that it works. It worked because maybe the economics could change, but they thought they could build a very tall building, and you get enough units to get the rents, and it'll make sense to rehab the Tasty Diner. And we'll see if the economic conditions improve so that they can build it, right? It's very hard today for that project to, we'll see when it actually, but it's tough. And also sometimes, if the economic conditions were right, that it'd be nice if the historic preservation of the county had a big historic preservation fund, so that if you truly wanted that building to stay, they buy it, right? But it's always a balance, and so I love older buildings. I live in a historic community, and we value that. We wanted to live in that community, but there are always these trade-offs. Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned in this position in local governments, doing this for quite a while, well, you don't actually have to do this for quite a while to learn that developers like certainty. Developers need certainty, for their business. And nobody likes being surprised by historic preservation. We're the worst surprise, frankly, that somebody could get. Like, this building is historic, or that this building is not designated as historic, but the community is so invested in it that they're going to come out to try and get it designated, and that's not what the developer or the property owner went into. They had a certain expectation for their project, looking at how the site was defined. There are ways to deal with that. There are proven ways to deal with that preservation offices across the country have done. Montgomery County did that in 1976 when the planning board adopted the locational atlas and index of historic sites. And at that time said, basically, here's our 100-year building survey of the county. We're throwing all these buildings on the locational atlas, and it was essentially a moratorium against demolition for all of those structures. We're still working through the locational atlas now, almost 50 years later, to determine whether or not those properties should be designated. In other local governments where I've been, where the regulatory burden on the staff is much smaller because they're smaller governments, we've been able to do wider building surveys and inventories to place whole categories of buildings kind of into a moratorium on demolition category or into a survey category where then the office is going to move forward and survey a lot of the buildings and then give the developer certainty, like especially with mid-century modern buildings, be like, okay, these are worthy of preservation in full. These are worthy of preservation in part. These maybe salvage a piece of it and just document it and the rest be done with that. What I've found in my time here is that there are so many things already designated. The team and the HPC were really treading water to keep up with the regulatory burden that we have, but there are ways to deal with that even in large counties so that the developers are not surprised. Like we know, like we have a book, we have our Montgomery Modern book. We have a lot of information about what is architecturally significant, just not quite the bandwidth to do like a locational atlas round 2 or something like that. So we're trying to, chip away at it with the work program and just do the best we can with the resources that we have.
I was going to add, just Rebecca, and I think this goes to the question of, what can you do to kind of highlight the importance of the building? And I can tell you from kind of behind the scenes with the planning department, working with Rebecca and her staff, we do try to emphasize the value that the building, if it remains, puts on your property. And I think the precedence of some of the buildings that have been adaptively reused, and I can think of many of them even in downtown Silver Spring, and kind of the increased value that has as an amenity and a promotional aspect for for that builder, developer, and whomever they flip it to. And you can go to websites to just show kind of the increased value. We do start there. We have so many good designers on our staff too that can show how it can be done. You have to have a willing partner in this. And if you are walking into this without that willing partner, then you're kind of starting from behind the 8 ball a little bit. But we do have some that actually have a vision, and I think if we can tap into that, we always do. So whether it's the value, whether it's the design, or both, and kind of what that increased value does for them, because to your point, it's about them making a profit, and if we can show that it does make them a profit, then that actually puts us in a driver's seat differently than others.
Robert, to add to that, as an engineer, I've gotten involved over the years in many life cycle costs where you look at, the cost to build something versus the energy to run something versus the payback and all of that. And I do think that so much of what developers think about is profit. But I think we have to start to help them change their mindset, that it's not just about the greenback. There's more to it than that. And I think that preservation is sort of it's acquired preservation. Where if you don't understand the value, you don't understand the value. And when you start to understand it, you get emotional about it. And when we see these structures come down, it's painful, and it may not be painful right there at that point in time. I've seen when a new building's built, generally speaking, everybody loves it, and then it goes through a period where what in the world were people thinking? And then you get to the end of the sort of at the back end where now all of a sudden what was sort of looked upon as why in the world would they have ever built that becomes nice again, and so we have a sort of responsibility to try to help figure out, are these buildings worth saving, and how can we entice developers into falling in love with this building and figuring out how to adaptively reuse it. And I think we have that, we need to have that passion, number one, but we also have to figure out, how can we help the developers see what we see when we look at some of these structures? And I know over even the last, 20 years, I've seen buildings that my first reaction is, oh my God, tear it down. But today I look at it and I see something that I didn't see back then. And so, we need to help each other try to make sure that those structures don't get prematurely torn down, because once they're gone, they're gone. And when getting back to the life cycle, how do you put a cost on emotional value? When you see something, and we all know that, we'll see something and go, oh my God, that's beautiful. How do you put a cost on that as a developer? But I can tell you what, they're in business to make money, but they're also in business to stay in business. And if the community, rallies around them and says, oh, that is so beautiful, I'm so thankful that you as a developer just chose to save that building, they got another project. And on the flip side, if they just do whatever they want to do out of greed, it's going to probably catch up with them at some point. So I think, yes, money's always important. We're all in business to make money, but we're also in business to satisfy our clients. And we have to sort of take the passion that we have and help the community. It does take resources. You don't have the resources that you need. But I will say this, you're probably in better shape than some other counties and other states, who are struggling with this. But we still need to do as much as we can with what we have.
Additionally, a historic building can become the center of a community. It can become its focal point, like in Kensington, or the Tacoma Bank building, or in Rockville, which lost almost its entire downtown to urban renewal, the Farmers Bank and Trust building, which is going to be its history center now in the very near future. These historic buildings can become a center of the community, not only because of the services they can provide to the community, but because it's an architectural element that is unique and special within that community. And particularly, Montgomery County, grew out into the farm and the dairy farms and the farm fields up county, and it's all spread suburban development, which is really hard to kind of love if you didn't grow up there. But when you have a spec development, which is just endless housing, it's really important to have a community focal point that represents that community in a way that anybody coming in from out of that community can recognize it. And if you have a historic building there, that is the easiest thing to do, is use that building as your focal point. And even if it doesn't match the architecture of the spec development, it is outstanding in itself and should be considered for adaptive reuse, as opposed to losing it and there's nothing there. There's nothing to hold those families in that community for generations. Like Tacoma is people come there, they move there, they want to move there, they wait for the houses to come on the market, You're not going to see that, in the mid-century suburban sprawl, if there isn't something focal for those families to sit there and say, I want to live in the same place I grew up in, and I want my kids to be there to grow up too. They have to have something there to focus on.
I have a question. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Have you seen other jurisdictions do it better in terms of raising money to, or any cities or whatever? I mean, do they, I don't know, maybe there's a tax, so they get like a 1 cent tax and they use it for historic, to have a fund so that maybe if there are these 3 or 4 iconic buildings that they really, really want, that they can go in and buy them or help the developer buy it or help, I'm just saying, have you seen other do it differently or to raise funds?
That's a great question. There is, the AI Google is not helping me with this, but I do know there is a jurisdiction in California that does have something like a 1% sales tax on the meals that goes to their historic preservation fund for the city. We're in a little bit of a, we are the local government, and so being the government, like our ability to kind of advocate and lobby for ourselves is boxed in a little bit, at least from the staff level. What I've seen, to me, the most successful places are places that have really fully matured advocacy organizations, like the DC Preservation League is a really excellent example of that. And the DC Preservation League with Rebecca Miller, who's been in charge of that for over 20 years now, they do really wonderful projects. They do National Register surveys, they fundraise, they have all kinds of fundraising events to support the DC local historic preservation office. And so examples like that, the nonprofit world of preservation, like the strength of their advocacy organizations can directly affect kind of the health and efficacy of the local governments that are doing historic preservation work. So I think here regionally, the DC Preservation League probably does, this is just my humble opinion. I don't know if other people have opinions about that, but they really do excellent work in that space.
I have a question. Instead of looking at a developer and wanting them to have, esoteric value or goodwill value, have we ever explored giving them credits for like adequate public facility based on the value of and then scoring them higher, and then maybe seeking tax reductions or some kind of monetary incentive to build and maintain a building that could be historically designated, or incentivize them to apply for historic designation to receive some kind of tax reduction or benefit? Have we explored those type of opportunities?
I could talk about the tax credit piece, but Robert.
Right, we have. There's been a number of different tools that we've used, and I think the most recent one has been our public benefits. While they didn't really play out the way that we wanted them to over the last probably 5 to 8 years, we've changed it to where they're getting an FAR or a density increase by tapping into some of these things that we've identified. One of those is historic preservation. So yes, there are incentives. Now, whether or not there's too many incentives that they can just choose from, and they go to the ones that are probably the easiest to manage, I think that's been a challenge, and I think that was one of the reasons we changed the public benefit point system to an FAR base, so that we can pinpoint items and say, if the master plan really identified a site, then we can dictate to some degree to say you can go to that certain public benefit to manage. We have looked at certain improvements from a proportionality piece of it that says if it's too much, we feel like the historic preservation component of it kind of takes you a little bit further above the level of improvements, and maybe we would need to do some of the other ones that would be, I wouldn't say frontage improvements, but maybe off-site improvements from a transportation network. But yes, we have a number of different tools that we use.
We did that with the University Boulevard corridor plan with the designation of the Horad House. When, John, did we give them like an extra 0.5 FAR, or was it height on that site? Because we were designating them historic, we gave them a little bit more in the rezoning that was put on that property. The Horad House was owned by the church next door, Hispanic church. And so we gave them that little bit of incentive for designating it. The county has had a historic preservation tax credit program since 1984, where it was in 2013, they changed the law so that 25% of exterior rehab, eligible exterior rehabilitation items get a 25% tax credit. So someone spends $10,000 repainting their house, they get a $2,500 tax credit against their county property taxes. If a property is also listed to, or eligible for listing to the National Register of Historic Places, they can get a tax credit from the state for interior and exterior work for an additional 20%. Now, I have seen local tax credit programs that are more expansive than ours. For example, Prince George's County allows for rehab tax credits on the interior of their historic buildings, whereas here in Montgomery County, it's only on the exterior of the building. So while they actually get many fewer applications, but they can give developers or property owners credits for, like refinishing the wood floors and painting and all that kind of interior structural stabilization work that we're not able to give them tax credits for. So there are other ways. I definitely think we could tweak our existing laws around the tax credits, and then also, as Robert said, working on the public benefit side to further incentivize historic preservation.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? So, obviously, the most recent, I think, prominent example of where we encountered this question was the ComStat building, of course, in Clarksburg. And Robert, you mentioned before, like a big or maybe perhaps the biggest initial piece of this is like, is there a willing partner on the other side? And I think clearly in that case, for a variety of reasons, there was not. We don't need to kind of relitigate all the different moving pieces of that. But I'm curious, like outside of that example, with other things that we've seen, from a regulatory standpoint, like when we receive when a developer comes in and sort of presents something. And then we have an interest internally to saying, oh, well, have you considered actually this? What have been the sort of decision, what maybe turned them from a no or to like a, yeah, let's actually, like, are there specific tools, incentives, or I guess persuasive arguments that we have found kind of resonated in some cases?
I can probably think of a few projects, and maybe one I would start with is in downtown Silver Spring. It was the National Dry Cleaner site, which I think is now the Heritage. But a good portion of the facade of the building was preserved, and it's right on Georgia Avenue, right across from Montgomery College in Burlington, which turns into Philadelphia, I think. And that one that was on I would almost call that a Superfund site because it was a dry cleaner site. And there was a lot of tax benefits that they received for cleaning that site up through WMATA, and I think WSSC. So there were some incentives, and I think one of the things that came out of that as well was 20 years ago we had a different system in place in terms of optional method developments, meaning if they went above kind of a base standard and they could get additional height and density, usually there was public use space or public open space that was provided. So we worked with them to make sure that it was historically more significant and representative of that site itself in the front, and gave them a little bit of a break in terms of having to go too far off site to do public amenity space or so. So that was one, and they, the density and the height are sometimes carrots, I think, that are offered, but I think it really is dependent on the developer as to whether or not they want to take advantage of that. We've had some other ones, I think, that have come in. Canada Dry site is one that was adaptively reused, and we worked with them again on the densities, on the heights, and it's almost a snapshot in time in terms of what zone and what amenities were required at the time versus where they are now. So those are a few I think that I can think of right now that gave us an opportunity to kind of move it forward.
Yeah, and I wonder if, in addition, thinking about those as a snapshot in time is kind of an interesting perspective too, because, the market has changed so dramatically, of course, in the past, even the past year, but beyond that, the past 5 years since COVID, and then even further back since 2009. And I wonder if, given changing market conditions, we can continue to kind of adapt with those times to try to identify, okay, well, the things that did work for Canada Dry or worked for the dry cleaners, they're no longer persuasive. And so what can we sort of figure out given the different market dynamics and things like that moving forward?
Right. And I think even with some of those projects, the thresholds for affordable housing were a little different back then in terms of even the unit sizes and the mixes. And so I think it was up to us and incumbent on us to work with the housing groups to make sure that, that it fits within the model that they were proposing. One thing I would also say is that site, I think that was the Smith Group maybe that did it, but when you have a really strong architect that can push in a different way, it makes a huge difference. And if they have if they have that willingness to kind of push their client towards something that is more meaningful, it's helpful and it makes our job easier too. We don't always have that. So we have architects on staff, we have people that push as well. But when we're in sync with some of their designers, I think it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
So Commissioner Linden, and Mr. Cronenberg, that site reminds me of the Canada Dry, reminds me of the Tasty Diners, meaning that it was big enough, right? Big enough that you could have the historic piece and then have the piece on the side that you can go tall with, and and create enough value that you could still do the historic piece. But on a really small site, sometimes it's harder. For example, when we did, at the time I was working with the Bizzuto Group, we did the Bethesda Theater project. So that was, we had to keep the theater, right? But the economics were right in Bethesda that you could put a high-rise building above it and all this thing around it. So there was, can you get enough value, even with all the credits, to make it work? And if you can get it with height or, density or all these other things, it can work. So I think on the right sites, you can preserve the historic as well as, the economic engine, right?
Okay. So we're going to finish up with outreach efforts. So again, we do a little bit of everything in historic preservation, right? Regulatory, master planning, education, and outreach, and placemaking. So outreach efforts in the past, outreach has always been a part of what the Historic Preservation Office and the HPC have engaged in. And so often the planning board members have been our partners in that and then have initiated like their own outreach program. So I'm just going to highlight a few, and I was hoping to maybe talk about some examples of maybe things we could do together in the future. So we've done bicycle tours for the past decade, past 12 years. This is a picture on the left of bike tour we did a few years ago that ended up right in front of the Warner Mansion in Kensington that we've already seen. In the middle, we have a bike tour. This was the rack card, front and back of a bike tour that we did that went up through Brookville. Took in that part of the Up County. Dan, didn't that start at the canal at like one of the lock houses? And then we went, and then you guys like went all the way up. That was a 30-mile ride.
No, well, I thought this was before me, or was this not? Was
The
this
one
the first
in the
one I
middle.
did?
The one in the middle was definitely. I'm sorry.
Oh, the one in the middle. Yes, the one in the middle. Yeah, that was a really long ride.
Yes. We sort of beta tested it. Maybe I don't bike. Just by the way, I don't ride bikes. So this was. Dan.
Yeah, it was West County, and it gets hillier out that way.
And then on the right is a rack card from a Docomomo bike tour that had to do with celebrating mid-century modern architecture. So bring this up, particularly with the bike tours. One of our previous planning board chairs, Casey Anderson, was a huge bike guy, like bike enthusiast, and he, as soon as I started, he's like, Rebecca, we need some bike tours of places in Montgomery County, historic sites that people aren't otherwise going to see. He's like, if you put this together, I will promote it. And he did. He promoted it on all of his social media channels and come do a bike ride of, the Ag Reserve with the planning board chair. And we ended up at a restaurant in Brookville. Did you do one of those? Were you? Oh my goodness. See, So Casey was great about that, and they're a fair amount of work to put together, but they were a super lot of fun. Do you remember any of the sites that you saw or anything that like stood out?
I just remembered that hit a couple uphill routes.
Oh, they're saying, sorry.
Just hit a couple of uphill spots, and it was kind of difficult, but I wasn't ready, but it was in the agricultural reserve, I remember. Yeah, pretty cool.
Well, the mid-century modern bus tour
Oh, yes.
would be a lot easier for most people to do.
Yes. So in the bike tour, I ran the support vehicle. It was my Prius, and I had cookies for everybody. And I was at all of the stops with cookies to keep everybody well fueled. But we focused, I'll go back to this real quick. A lot of them we focused on like publicly accessible sites in our Montgomery Parks system, other museum sites, places that we tried, that could be easily accessible on a Saturday that we could just, go out there. And Dan, kind of gave the nickel tour of some of these places. I did too. And people really, really liked the bike tours. So those were fun. And then for at least 4 years, we did bus tours promoting our Montgomery Modern initiatives, and I just had some pictures for that. So we have a whole page on our historic preservation website that talks about our bus tours, and we have videos of folks who are on the tour. Our other deputy director, Robert's counterpart, Bridget, was our communications supervisor, like our communications director at the time, and Bridget is on camera. Bridget came from City of Rockville, like she did TV in Rockville, so she nailed it. She was great, kind of introing the tours on our YouTube pages. So we did these bus tours where we would go to publicly accessible sites, but we would also go to people's homes. Like the staff worked really hard to create these relationships with property owners, with some of the churches, and they were really kind, and they invited, busloads of people to come into their houses, to come into their places of worship. Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, I think before she was even on the planning board, or right when she came on, did some of these bus tours and remembers them really fondly. So that was one, there you go. That was one thing I just wanted to talk about, to kind of wrap up the evening. Any new outreach ideas, or if folks have done kind of other types of tours or other things in the past around historic properties or parks, or anything else that you think that we might do, or things that other board members might be interested in engaging in.
I'll just say for, just speaking personally, I think it'd be really interesting for the board, for the planning board, kind of similar to what we were hearing about before, to maybe bring in some architects or developers who have really been engaged in this in other places in particular, whether it's, comparable types of counties, big cities, small cities, places that have maybe similar kind of types, ages of structures that we encounter here, and just hearing more from them about, I think, for me, that would really help inform my ability to do some, my own sort of, internal or external communication around this kind of thing, and also help connect the dots between various policy goals that we have, because we haven't really talked about this as much. This is getting a little bit off kind of on a tangent, but one of the big questions I have in my mind when it comes to adaptive reuse, how does that impact on the back end? If we're talking about residential reuse, how does that impact affordability for the people who buy or rent on the back end? And assuming there are sufficient subsidies or incentives or tax breaks and kind of on and on and on, sure, I can imagine scenarios where we can make it attainable for folks to rent. But seeing real examples of that, I think would really help clarify to my mind, and hearing more about how they kind of put together their, the financing for that kind of thing, like all the different layers, all the different collaborations that are required. I think that'd be great. Seeing a few examples of that, hearing from a few folks who have done it would be fantastic. So, that doesn't necessarily have to be like, a formal meeting, of course. It could be, I don't know, maybe having some people talk to us remotely during a board meeting. We could even maybe just have a lunch, a lunch session or something where we just hear from them informally, if that's allowed. Lawyers are not in the room right now. We can talk to them. But yeah, I think that would be a cool starting point for kind of expanding my own thinking about this.
We're always happy to set up events like that, so I think those are, and it not only promotes the topic, but it promotes the two groups and kind of the work we're trying to do, so. And I'm sure we would have plenty of examples and people to kind of pull from.
Yeah, no, that's a great examples. If the board could lend its name to, except like it's not a seminar, but what you're saying, like we do these speaker series, or we do this, maybe we do one piece of one speaker series could be on historic preservation, adaptive reuse, or one of the things that, when adaptive reuse sort of really took off, Montgomery County really didn't have a warehouse district, or like in DC or Baltimore or whatever. So, it wasn't really hot here. But we do have historic buildings and stuff like that, and so in addition to what you're talking about, like the speaker series things, maybe I know some communities have these house and garden tours, and if you can leverage off maybe one of, like, I don't know, Tacoma has this one, I know others, so if maybe one of the house and garden tours also has the homes on that tour are kind of historic-y that year, or a couple of them, maybe you could also, what do you call it? We leverage with that, and, ask tickets for that, and do it as the board would, something like that, or.
Definitely. I'll interject really quick to say that the Maryland Home and Garden Tour for the state is being hosted in Kensington
Oh, great.
this spring. So I will send invitations and notices about that to everybody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's very timely.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
maybe, I don't know which houses or whichever, but maybe you could just, you can also lose that as that they, you could, I don't know, I'm not tech savvy, but how you ping some, or connect, it's like how everyone joins everyone's website, that, and I don't know, so something like that. And a bike tour or a bus tour, I think we could be interested in that, whether it's bus board sponsored or something like that, that's, if that worked, maybe as people get older, the bus tour would be, or you can, every.
Or don't bike.
Or don't bike, yeah.
Or a special e-bike
A special,
tour.
yeah, the e-bike, yeah. So all of those are great ideas, and we would be open to sponsoring something like that.
Those barcicles, there's like 20 people.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, just
The
stay away
duck
from hills.
or rent the duck thing,
First of all, I'm amazed that you had the bandwidth to put together tours like that,
We
all on
did
your
it.
own.
We certainly did it at one. We had a really wonderful staff, Claire Kelly, who wrote the Mid-Century Modern book, and basically her entire work program became promoting mid-century modern in the county. So we were able to carve out that space for her to write the book, to do these tours, to do all these great promotions. It was like her career capstone passion project, which was an amazing legacy to leave to us. But yeah, that was really Claire's baby before she retired, was putting together these bus tours.
Are those still happening, or?
No, because I do not have the bandwidth to do that just
Are there advocacy groups or historic societies or anything that you can partner with? Because in Los Angeles, like you said, a place that has strong advocacy groups has effective historic programs. And the things you're doing, the LA Conservancy does in Los Angeles, and the planning department partners with them. Like every 2 years, they pick a different part of the city and have kind of this big weekend for, train members of the public in advocacy, which the planning department and the group works on together. So, if there are groups like that, they could share some of the burden. But what about, would it be possible to come up with kind of like an awards program, like for best?
Both of these, I'm actually
As-
going to
As a matter of fact, Montgomery Preservation, Inc. is a county-wide historic preservation organization. It's an umbrella organization of all the different local historic societies like Kensington.
Okay.
And each historic society sends one of their members to be on the board of MPI. And MPI, and so each one of those groups does its own thing, right? But MPI coming up is going to be pushing very hard on outreach and education. And a couple of our groups have done bus tours, so we're going to try to reactivate those bus tours. We've talked about doing a repeat of the Claire Kelly bus tour through our organization, where actually one of our members' organizations, or one of our board members, is heading up the Montgomery 250 Commission Committee and getting that organized up county at the county fairgrounds. And then we've also talked about, as part of the outreach, doing phone app walking tours for each area. So it's, historic preservation in your neighborhood, and a family could take a walk to find those historic buildings within within walking distance of their home. Tacoma's easy, that's an easy one. Silver Spring has actually a couple of tiny historic districts that would be easily walkable. And then up county, there's the rustic roads and all of that. So it's really, that's going to be the push for MPI this coming year, is outreach and education to make people aware of historic preservation, because people like you don't even know we're there. And that's a problem.
Yeah, but if those all sound great, but also if the department or your organization, if there was a way to do like kind of an awards program for like best adaptive reuse of the year, best restoration, and that could over time become kind of a prestige thing. You can even have like a little award ceremony and something like that.
Actually, MPI does that too.
Oh, you already do it?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay.
And we have a variety of different awards, and we have not been running short of candidates to win the awards. We usually give somewhere between 4 and 8 awards. We've been doing it every year, but it's become a huge lift to organize it, so we're going to be moving to every other year, and that will allow us to get more candidates, but also the planning for it is significant. But we've had a couple of award ceremonies at the seminary, the Forest Glen Seminary, which is a fabulous ballroom, but we have the awards programs around the county. So
That brings up to, I'm sorry, the county, the planning department sponsors, co-sponsors with the AIA, the Potomac Valley AIA, a design excellence program that has been going for 10 years, 8 years, Robert, 8 or 10 years. And I want to say at one point there was an adaptive reuse category that we don't have, or we haven't given out an award for that in, I think, several award cycles. But we could, like Karen said, there are no shortage, like the Warner Circle mentioned, there are no shortage of really excellent projects that on their own would qualify for the AIA's design awards. So that's something that's a program, again, that's run out of the planning department, sponsored by the planning board and the AIA. And we can talk about getting an adaptive reuse category or historic preservation category back on the design.
That's a great idea, and we just had that. It was called the Gwyn, or sitting around the Gwyn Wright Design Excellence Award, and so that's a great idea that we could talk to Paul about, making one of those. that historic preservation category and have you guys, also while they play up the Historic Preservation Commission and whatever.
One idea that I admit I cannot take credit for at all, but this conversation made me think of in terms of like leveraging other stuff going on out there. So I don't know, this comes from the transportation community, so it's a bit of a different thing, but every year they have the local DC advocacy community for transportation. I say this lovingly, like nerds like myself. They play this game called Transportation Bingo. And Karen, your idea of sort of an app with locations paired with, Rebecca, what you said about staff just does not have the capacity to sort of do tours on your own anymore. This Transportation Bingo game is a week-long, sort of competition. It's self-directed. So the only thing that happens, and I think, it's largely done by, advocates or, nonprofits in this case, basically setting the parameters of the game, doing, communication around it, getting the word out, and then encouraging people as they go about playing the game to be very vocal about the things that they see. So basically the terms are essentially like, use public it's a bingo board, so you cross things off as you do it. So use public transportation to cross a state line, could be one example. It's just a series of maybe 9 or 15 different public transportation or active transportation related activities you can do in a fun way or a silly way or creative way. And then you just share your results and it's just a fun thing. And this is making me think of like, oh, I wonder if there's kind of a historic preservation version of this, in sort of a bingo game fashion where you just encourage people to get out there for a week and go find different sites of different kinds and be very vocal about it. And then at the end, maybe there can be like some sort of gathering or celebrate or, whatever the case is. But it could be a nice way of creating energy around it without a huge amount of like staff time. While we can sort of direct people toward kind of categories of sites and they can sort of, choose their own adventure and just explore the county and see what they can find.
That's really cool.
That's a great idea.
That's a really cool idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Building off of that, Preservation Month, right? It's like Preservation Month bingo.
Yeah.
And, it's attracting people there. But I also, I wanted to build off of your thought about the app, with the audio. I think the bike tours too, right? It doesn't have to be us running it all together, but you have maps and you have information that, I think about, I'm not a biker either, so it's not me going out there, but I have many friends who like Sunday mornings, they go on a 3-mile bike ride with their kid. And, for us to be able to even just put out, here's a route you can take and look at where you can stop along this route. And so I think there's some ways to maybe try to leverage some of the research and all of the efforts we've already done that are not, that fit more in with the volume of staffing that we have now, but still allows that information and those resources to really be out there. And whether it's people can print the rack cards themselves or we strongly advertise them and we have them here, or maybe it's even partnering with some of the regional services centers to, put them in their spaces for us, or some of the churches or places of worship that are maybe on some of those bike tours, right? Would they put them, so where else are you stopping? Might be another way to kind of just get people out and excited about some of the spaces that we have.
That sounds great. Thank you. And what I was a little remiss, and part of this, I wanted us to cover a lot tonight. We still do our preservationist newsletter several times a year, 4 or 5 times a year. That's been going for decades now. It's all digital. We have hundreds. Serena, do you actually happen to know how many people are subscribed to the preservationists? Just about?
Approximately 627.
627. And Serena runs our Twitter account, or our X account, our social media. Serena does all of that outreach for us, and we're doing a lot around the 250th and theme, for certain theme months, for Preservation Month, for African American Heritage Month, for other months. Serena's putting out a lot of content for us. whether it reaches people, that's the thing. We put the content out there, and trying to kind of gauge how effective it is one thing. But the bingo, I think that's a great idea. And we have the rack cards, and it's easy to work with the print shop and comms just to reprint them all again. And Alana, your contacts at the Regional Services Center or some places we normally don't go, that would be awesome.
Can we put the animal cemetery on the bingo card?
Yes,
Okay.
Aspen Hill, yes, definitely.
All this conversation made me think about something that I actually have at the house, and it's about the size of a deck of cards, and it's DC buildings. And, it's all the various buildings, and my wife and I kind of use that as an opportunity. Every now and then we'll pull one out and say, let's go see it. And maybe we could do something like that, where it's just a small deck of cards individually. On the front's the picture of the structure, on the historic house in Montgomery County, and on the back is a brief description. And you could probably make those available for a very small amount of money, and people might be interested in getting hold of those, either as just a memento or something that they could use to take a trip. And it could be on a bus, it could be walking, biking, whatever. And then one other thought is, as we were talking about this, maybe my age is showing, maybe it's a virtual thing. Maybe there's a way of creating, hosting on a website, and have the bus tour or the bike tour, but have it electronically, for those who might find it more difficult to be able to either carve out a full day or a couple hours or whatever it might take. They might actually be able to, using technology like the Matterport, where you may actually have be able to go on, if you're going on a realtor's site nowadays, they'll go walk through the whole entire house using an app. So there might be opportunities to do something like that virtually as well.
Cool. Great ideas, thank you.
By the way, that's a wonderful idea, and I think with something like the Robert Llewellyn Wright House, which is so difficult to get people through because it's so small, and getting down to it is interesting. That would be a wonderful way to showcase it without interfering with the owner's privacy, is a walkthrough that people can access online.
And some of our more interesting cemetery sites are not accessible easily at all. So, virtual, sort of a 350 photograph, something like that, might be an interesting thing. I suppose we could. I mean,
You could do that in Aspen Hill too, like find all the animals in the Aspen Hill.
and I mean, there are some famous burials in Montgomery County. F. Scott Fitzgerald, for example, and there are others. So you could sort of have go visit certain particularly significant spots.
By the way, it's still in planning, but for the Montgomery 250, F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda in the 1920s is going to be a moment of that day with dances and performances and things like that.
Cool. So we also, in our department, through Serena with our Twitter X feed, we promote the work that other nonprofits are doing too, and the work that Heritage Montgomery is doing, and other folks in this region, in this space. There is a lot still going on. Fortunately, it's not just all on us, but all of these are really, really great ideas. So thank you guys so much. I know we have other business and adjournment on here. I just have the staff contacts. I didn't have anything else for other business, unless Artie or Jeff.
I have not, no.
No, we've had a full night, and in many positive ways, in that, it's so important to get together to, as I said, to learn about each other and learn more deeply about what you do. And I would just like to end by saying, that historic preservation is so important to our county, to have a thriving county, complete county. So I'm so glad we work together. I'm so glad that Rebecca and her team is part of the MNCPPC, and we will do all we can to advocate for funding for the historic preservation group. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I think there might still be some cookies in the back, but I might not be able to promise that. But thank you all for coming and have a great rest of your
Yeah,
evening.
and Mr. Sartori,
Thank you,
get
Jason.
well.
Jason.